The United States was buoyed earlier on Wednesday when pharmaceutical company Pfizer produced updated data showing that its experimental COVID-19 vaccine was 95% effective, and that's up from 90% when it released its preliminary findings last week. The efficacy is comparable to data released on Moderna's vaccine days earlier, raising the prospects that the country with the highest total cases and deaths in the world could have 2 coronavirus vaccines available on a limited basis before the end of the year. Both companies have indicated that they will apply for emergency use authorization from the Food and Drug Administration within days, as the US daily case tally and death toll again reach alarming levels.
With several states across the country warning they're reaching breaking point with COVID hospitalizations at around 70,000, a record nationwide, Tuesday's new case numbers stood at above 150,000 with 1,600 deaths. That's almost 3 seated plane loads of an Airbus A380, the world's largest passenger airline. Additionally, the country has maintained a daily caseload of above 100,000 for the last 14 days. The vaccine news from Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech of 95% efficacy with no serious side effects makes it a key step in the fight against COVID-19.
The Pfizer-BioNTech is probably the most well-focused of the vaccines because it uses only this thing called the receptor binding domain. It uses a particular fragment of the spike protein as a vaccine, which means that pretty much all the antibodies that are generated are going to be neutralizing. So they're going to be antibodies that can actually stop the virus binding onto its receptor.
Both Pfizer and Moderna used a new technology in their vaccine development known as mRNA, a single-stranded molecule that produces instructions to make proteins that may treat or prevent disease in the body.
The particular data I think that's interesting, because of course the RNA vaccines are completely new, is the safety data. There was some concern about that. The amount of RNA that was used in the very early experiments from Moderna was very high, and that caused some concern. They've now reduced the dose, and the adverse events reported by the Pfizer trial are no more than you would expect from randomly what you would find in that size of trial populations.
While vaccine safety and efficacy has always been the first hurdle, distribution to a skeptical country of 330 million people will be the next big bump in the road, complicated by the lack of coordination between the administration of President Donald Trump and the transition team of the man who will replace him, all due to the incumbent's refusal to accept the outcome of the election.
They say they have this warp speed program that not only dealt with getting vaccines, but also how to distribute this. If we have to wait until January 20th to start that planning, it puts us behind over a month and a half. And so it's important that it be done, that there be coordination now or as rapidly as we can get that done.
As states around the country reimpose restrictions to indoor dining, closing down businesses like gyms and limiting indoor social gatherings to 10, sometimes a maximum of just 6 people, as the Thanksgiving holiday looms.
I just want to make sure that we're able to be together next Thanksgiving, next Christmas. I mean, it is an international crisis.
And while progress on vaccines is welcome news, it won't alleviate the strain being placed on health systems around the country in the short term. Better yet, the 3-pronged approach of wearing masks, washing hands regularly, and social distancing, but where countrywide buy-in remains politicized and therefore weak at best. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Well, our correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease joins us now on Skype from New York to share the latest on the United States. So, Sherwin, great to have you. On the one hand, I guess great news about the efficacy and safety of these vaccines and hopes that regulatory approval could get to them to market within weeks. But I guess also not at the levels that will impact the surging levels of outbreaks in the US at this time.
Yeah, absolutely correct, Peter. And, just some incoming news from New York City, where I am. The mayor announcing a short time ago that the largest public school system anywhere in this country, catering to 1.1 million children, will be closing from tomorrow. They did initiate a hybrid model where the majority continue to get instruction online, but some 300,000 on a rotational basis would be inside the classroom. That has now been closed, and that just tells you where we are. This once, of course, the epicenter, and of course, over 150,000 cases in the last 24 hours, 180,000 plus on Friday, above 100,000 per day over the last 2 weeks. And that really tells you where we are as a country, certainly in terms of where the US is. And you correctly point out that this vaccine is not going to be able to stem the tide we are now experiencing in this country, right? Moderna and Pfizer talk about possibly having some 20 million vaccine doses available before the end of the year. They hope to have about 50 million each that will go to different countries around the world. So this is not going to stem the current tide that we're seeing in terms of who will get those first 20 doses, right? They talk about essential workers, frontline workers, people that are packing groceries in stores around this country, older populations that are high risk. We don't understand what warp speed means in terms of this, the administration's approach to this, in terms of distribution, right? The president has spoken a bit about how the military will help distribute these vaccines, but to which states will they go? Are they coordinating with state level and local authorities? What is the relationship with the pharmaceutical companies in those states? We talk about, possibly getting people like yourself and myself vaccinated by April and only starting in April. So there are a lot of unknown questions and certainly a lack of answers from the administration, also due to the lack of coordination between the Trump administration and Biden's transition team. We also heard earlier this week from Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the World Health Organization, speaking to the optimism that is now shared about these vaccines, but that it's not a silver bullet. Let's watch.
This is not the time for complacency. While we continue to receive encouraging news about COVID-19 vaccines and remain cautiously optimistic about the potential for new tools to start to arrive in the coming months, right now, we're extremely concerned by the surging cases we're seeing in some countries, particularly in Europe and the Americas. Health workers and health systems are being pushed to the breaking point.
And the difficulty, in addition to everything I've just mentioned, Peter, is the fact that political leaders in this country are not speaking with one voice. You're having conflicting messages just around Thanksgiving that happens next week. This is the largest holiday in the United States. Families tend to come together, once a year, and the advice from certain parts of, certainly from the Biden transition team, is to limit those gatherings to 5, no more than 10 people. But there are conflicting messages coming from various Republican governors in this country, and certainly from the White House administration itself.
Your piece a little bit earlier on, you said that there's still no coordination between the Biden transition team and the administration of President Donald Trump. But the work of the transition does continue, including a call between President-elect and President Ramaphosa yesterday,
who incidentally is also the African Union chair. Yeah, we got a readout from the South African presidency first yesterday, talking about kind of just, sort of an outline of what they talked about. They discussed ways to strengthen US-Africa relations to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. President Ramaphosa said he looked forward to a strong partnership at a bilateral level with the United States and the continent of Africa. We then got a readout from the president-elect's team, Peter. He thanked President Ramaphosa for his congratulations and expressed his desire to deepen America's strategic strategic partnership with South Africa. The president-elect underscored their shared interest in tackling corruption, containing COVID-19, laying the foundation for a sustainable global economic recovery and addressing the threat of climate change. He also thanked President Ramaphosa for his leadership of the African Union and shared his intention to deepen America's partnership with African institutions, governments and citizens. He was in conversation with members of his team and he touched on kind of his deliberations with world leaders, some 13 of which have spoken to Biden. Let's watch a bit of that, Peter.
I've spoken to, I think, 13, I'm not sure how many, Samantha, but 13 heads of state so far. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's less about me than the circumstance. There's a degree of enthusiasm and expectation that we're going to have difficulty meeting, but with my basic message, America's back, and it's no longer America alone. And also, we've been through a lot of damage done the last 4 years, in my view, and we need to rebuild our institutions and our workforce.
And I can also confirm, Peter, that the General Services Administration of the U.S. government that essentially needs to sign off on Biden's projected win in this election and therefore release funds to his transition teams to do things like background checks, office space, to get email addresses. That has not happened yet. Pressure, we understand, is building, certainly in terms of Republican quarters, but very much from the Democratic side, as frustration now builds at the lack of coordination between the administration and the transition team, and the impacts that's going to have on things like Operation Warp Speed in terms of rolling out the coronavirus vaccines, but also issues of national security and coordination. That is just not happening because President Trump has not accepted his defeat in this election yet.
Yeah, not accepting that defeat for sure. So give us the latest on the various court cases that the Trump campaign continues to pursue. We see President Trump continuing to tweet about how he won the election, despite those projections showing him losing by both the popular votes by more than 5 million and the Electoral College by a margin of 306 to 232.
I just had a look at the numbers. It's almost 6 million, the popular vote now that Biden leads. Look, there have been 26 lawsuits. I had to actually write all this down because it's complicated. It's a complicated answer to a very simple question. 26 lawsuits in the states of Michigan, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. As you understand, there is a recount that we understand has just concluded in the state of Georgia. We understand from election officials there, they have not found major discrepancies that are going to undermine the 14,000 margin that Biden enjoys in that state. We understand also that the Trump campaign today is going to initiate recounts in 2 counties in the state of Wisconsin, which Joe Biden won by 20,000. The former governor of Wisconsin has gone on the record and said it's very unlikely that a recount in that state is going to overturn a 20,000 vote margin. 15 of the 26 lawsuits, Peter, have been either dismissed, denied or settled. Yesterday, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out a case alleging from the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign, that officials in Philadelphia, which is one of the big counties in the state of Pennsylvania, which put Biden over the top in terms of the Electoral College, that officials in Philadelphia violated state law by maintaining a distance of 4.5 meters between observers from the Republican Party and officials that were counting ballots. The Supreme Court in the state of Pennsylvania threw that out. Yesterday, Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal lawyer, appeared in federal court in the state of Pennsylvania. And this is a question the judge asked Rudy Giuliani, and I'm going to quote the judge here. Quote, "You're asking this court to invalidate some 6.8 million votes, thereby disenfranchising every single vote in the Commonwealth referring to Pennsylvania. Can you tell me how the result could possibly be justified?" This was a case where Rudy Giuliani is essentially seeking ballots to be thrown out or certainly not to be certified in the election. The judge asking a very pertinent question, but the broad-based argument from the Trump campaign and Rudy Giuliani in particular is that the election was stolen, and if they don't act now, this could happen again. But of course, where's the evidence, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, it's a busy time for Donald Trump, busy with everything except the matter at hand, which is COVID-19. Firing national security advisors, And now I believe he's fired the head of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency after that individual released a statement calling the 2020 election the most secure in American history. What's the latest on that one?
Yeah, I mean, the president is obviously not embracing the facts around this election. And so Chris Krebs, the director of cybersecurity and infrastructure at the Department of Homeland Security, issuing a statement along with people that worked with him at the agency, basically saying the November 3rd election was the most secure in American history. Right now, across the country, election officials are reviewing and double-checking the entire election process. Part of that statement explains what happens when you have close calls in states that, you can then recount the ballots by hand. There's a paper trail, just really explaining the measures that are in place to address questions of or allegations of fraud or impropriety or malfeasance, right? And so what was the response from President Trump? A tweet, a firing by tweet as things go here, tweeting that the statement was inaccurate. Twitter then in turn flagged the president's statement that accusing Chris Krebs of making an inaccurate statement. Trump said that the tweet was highly inaccurate and that he would Chris Krebs would be immediately terminated. So that has happened. Chris Krebs then subsequently tweeted and pinned this at the top of his Twitter feed. He said he was honored to serve. We did it right. Defend today, secure tomorrow. That was the response to his firing from the president. So not backtracking on the statement, but certainly standing his ground, Peter.
And I would imagine firing the head of cybersecurity in the world that we live in today, especially given the sabotage or influence that countries like Russia were accused of doing in the last election. This is not a great thing to do. You are making your country particularly vulnerable.
Well, the argument is well beyond, the firing. And remember, he also fired his defense secretary, and the speculation is the defense secretary was basically making the case for not reducing the number of troops we have seen announced by the administration in Iraq. So if you are a counterpoint to anything this president is seeking to achieve, or if you are going to contradict him publicly, even though the facts might be on your side, this is a very vindictive individual that will terminate your work, even though his term in office will be terminated on January 20th. The facts simply are not on the president's side here. And I think, as much as Chris Krebs might have lost his job, I think he is satisfied that they did a good job. And of course, with the new administration coming in soon, Peter, he might be rehired again.
Okay. Thanks so much, Sherwin. Great update there. Thanks so much indeed. All right,
thanks,
that's Sherwin Bryce-Pease reporting there from New York. As you can see, we've got President-elect Joe Biden. He's getting on with it despite lack of cooperation from the White House. And in the meantime, the White House is doing everything except dealing with COVID-19.